Hi, good morning, everyone. Let's begin. We have 8 people and it's time now. So, yesterday, are there any questions that you have about yesterday's class? Although it was a very introductory lecture.
Could you please explain Lexia once again? Although it's there in the essay as well, but could you please explain it once
Okay.
again?
So, for Lexia, according to Barthes, are connected blocks of text. For example, I will just share my screen and
Is it like old sort of printing?
you could say that. See, it's like old sort of printing. The Gutenberg Bible, for example, was printed through blocks, right? So you had
Okay, yeah,
the
yeah.
typeset of an entire page, and then you printed that, rather than today's printing, which is based on separate alphabetical letters, right? So, for example, if you focus on the hypertext example that I have here, which is called Inflections, so it is with Lexia's by a diverse cast of authors. Right. So Lexia's here, according to the Roland Barthes Waller sense, is are blocks of text. So for example, let's just go to this. Right. So now this entire block of text would be defined as a lexia. Okay. And when we go to the next one, yeah, this entire block of text would then be another lexia. So this is the sense of blocks of text in which which Landau is going to talk about them in this chapter that we're going to study. So that is the sense that you have to keep in mind. Ki whenever lexia comes, that means a complete block of text, not a paragraph. Because if you see, these are paragraphs are divisions of lines, but lexias are blocks, complete independent blocks that you put one next to the other, next to the other to create some kind of narrative. Like you build a house brick by brick, that is the kind of connection that Landau is drawing between lexias and how it creates narrative. Is that clear now?
Yes, ma'am. Thank
Okay,
you.
you're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, so we will begin with reconfiguring narratives in just a second. What I want to draw your attention to is the other narratives that I was talking about yesterday. And why do I want to draw your attention to this is that because there are a lot of hypertext fictions that he's going to talk about, but narratives can exist in other forms as well, right? So let's just take a look at other narratives like we saw Dancing Bush yesterday, right? Or we looked at networks yesterday. So today I want you to look at other hypertext narratives which are available online and which you can use as examples in your answers, which you can consult also, because a lot of these narratives that he mentions sometimes in the book, this book is a really old one. It was written in 2006 and it's been more than a decade since then. And so a lot of those narratives are either untraceable or you can't find the links online. And I have found these narratives for you and I'll share their links also. So if you are interested, you want to write them for an assignment or maybe you want to include them in your answers, you can definitely do that. Right. So let's look at this one. This is called Subway Story. So the whole idea is that subway, like what they call metros in other countries, especially in New York. So this is the idea of a subway. For example, you go from one station to another station to another station. In the same way, you're going to choose a line. I'll just remove this icon here. Yeah. So you're just going to choose a line. For example, welcome to Subway Story. Please choose which line you would like to write. Right. So there are so many examples. So for example, let's just pick one. Okay. And then you would be directed to some kind of text, again a block of text, a lexia, right? And you could then move on to you could then go home or you could go on to this hypertext here and explore this further, right? अब यहाँ पर मेरे को कोई hypertext नहीं दिख रहे apart from this me, so I will go here and so on and so forth and so on and so forth. So this is another example or something. So if I go back to home and if I maybe select line D, right? So we have the yellow line, purple line, all of those colored lines. So they have alphabetical or numbered lines. So I will go to the next hyperlink or the next hyperlink. And this is just a connection of stories. This is what Landau is going to argue again and again, that narratives, hypertext fictional narratives, in this chapter especially is going to say this, that they do not have any kind of linearity. So I could I could go to A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4. I could pick or choose any one. And if you try to explore this, maybe you wouldn't have picked one. Maybe you picked 6 or 5 or 7 or any other number. So the story that I am getting by clicking these random numbers is actually very random. And it will be completely different from the kind of narrative that you will get when you find a hypertext fictional narrative. And this is why Rand is going to argue that hypertext fiction is completely unconventional. It is not like the books that we're usually used to. It is not like the fiction that we're usually used to. And this point is going to make again and again. So next, how do I do this? Yeah, yes. Okay, so we have this Hegeroscope. This is another hypertext fiction. I don't know how to enter this. Yeah, sorry. I found this one very interesting. If anybody wants to actually read things, and if you're interested in reading what hypertext is like, then this is a good choice. And this is just going to go on and on and on in the same vein. There's not a lot that you can do here. Another thing that I want to draw your attention to, another hypertext narrative is this. Yes, this is all the news that's fit to print. It's a collection, a series of images, okay, by Zodi Zeller or somebody, right? If you look at these pictures, I would like you to just take a second and look at the kind of pictures that she's included here, and tell me what you see. Right, so I'm just going to go and scroll, थोड़ा and remember that the title of this piece is All the News That's Fit to Print. Anyone?
Something related to daily life.
I'm sorry?
Ma'am, something related to daily life incidents, events that happen in our lives daily. Like there's death or suffering, then people are happy,
हाँ.
then they are doing some work, either labor जैसा कुछ.
Okay, ठीक है. So everyday incidents, but not necessarily which happen in every life, because not every life is as maybe privileged or not privileged, which is seen here. But yes, everyday incidents nonetheless. Anybody else?
The reality.
Reality. Okay. So every day we have reality. What kind of reality?
Ordinary people.
Ordinary people. Okay. ठीक है. See, ordinary
I see American.
Ma'am,
हाँ.
maybe some piece of news that did not get as much coverage as it should have been given.
Okay. Are you referring to any specific image here?
Yes, ma'am, some images of common people that are not really put up in the media, rather politics are given more importance.
Okay. ठीक है. Manveer, you were going to say something?
I see some military people, American flags.
That's a good reference, yes.
I see a fair that's going on. Some animals, some construction work.
Okay.
And that's it.
Okay, so you pointed out a very good part, a good point about this. A lot of these images are either showcasing violence, right? Direct violence here, right? Or some kind of advent of violence that's going to come with this kind of image where you have your hands clasped, okay? Or the outcome of a violence, okay? Or the outcome of a protest that you see. What is the aftermath of a protest? You have celebration here, or you have some kind of natural disaster striking somewhere. There's also a sense of community in this picture, in these pictures. Sometimes, for example, here and here and here, you have people who are not alone, who are with their families, or who are trying to save other people. Sometimes they are also protesting, like in this picture here, right? So you have community, you have violence, as other people have said, you have ordinary everyday reality, like here, okay, or you have funerals. So you have all the common emotions that we feel every day and might not necessarily feel for like a longer part of our lives, right? Because I feel that a lot of students, a lot of people generally do not have the kind of suffering which is depicted here. Right. So in those senses, it shows us emotions that we might experience in our life, but maybe not every day. So how is this a hypertextual thing? Because for example, if I click on maybe this image, it's going to lead me to some kind of text, some kind of other image, right? So this is why it is hypertextual. The point of including this is that the first point that Landa is going to make in this chapter is that not every narrative takes the same form to be hypertextual. Just because I have shown you some kind of, for example, I've shown you these images or I've shown you inflections. So that does not mean that every kind of hypertextual narrative will be divided into lexias of text. Hypertextual narratives of fiction, even fiction or non-fiction. They could include fiction or non-fiction. They could include different forms. They could include different kind of images. They could include sound. They could make games out of it. They could include some comedy, humor, tragedy, silence. So there's always this interplay of emotions. There's an interplay of genres, and there's an interplay of form. Hypertext fiction for Landau does not have a fixed form, which is why it is so unconventional, and which is why it can question the kind of normative conventions that we have come to associate with fiction in general and with narratives in particular. Right. So please keep this thing in mind when you are looking at the chapter. I am sorry, sometimes I'm technologically challenged. Yes. Then let's go to the next one. So I found this, and this is by a very well-known artist now, Samantha Goldman. So what she's done is, this is something that she did for a project at Brown University. And what she's done is she has written deconstruction of a 5x5 knot, 5 inch by 5 inch knot, meditations on the Book of Kells. So the Book of Kells is an important biblical chapter, which is not for your reference here. But what you'll see is that every knot here, so these bullet points kind of things, they represent knots. So every knot here represents some kind of text or some kind of animation or some kind of picture, right? So this will just bring you an animation. If I go back and if I click maybe this one, okay, now this is going to give me a text based on some kind of reading that she's done for the digital tone, for the medial tone. So in these kind of narratives, what do you get? What is the biggest inference that you draw from such kind of narratives is that they do not have a very linear form. This is where we ended our lecture yesterday when I was telling you how postmodernity, the hallmark of postmodernity is that it is not linear. And we left with that because we didn't have time. So I'll just go into it for a couple of minutes. What is non-linearity? So there is some kind of linearity means order. Right, so you have a beginning of a story, you have the beginning of a story, you have the middle of a story, and you have the end. A good example of this would be the novels of Charles Dickens. They never start in the middle, right? Or if you look at a Bildungsroman, so I hope you know Jane Eyre or David Copperfield or any of the other famous Bildungsromans that we have in our repertoire today. So what happens in a Bildungsroman? You have a boy or a girl who is born, right? They grow up, so you have the childhood, that is the beginning of the person. Then you have a middle age where they gain adulthood, where all the action and the climax happens. And then you have the end of their lives. So usually they marry or they settle, they have children, or some kind of thing happens to them. And some kind of, after all their adventures, they come and they settle down, which is their old age. So how is the narrative proceeding in this sense? It has a definite beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. This is what we call a linear narrative. Now, if I take a linear narrative like Jane Eyre and I open it in the middle, it will not make any sense. Why will it not? Because I don't know anything about the beginning. I don't know anything about the character. So what are linear narratives then? They go from one event to another event to another event. They're definitely not circular. And they can only proceed in a linear fashion from point A to point Z. Right, from point 1 to point 10. They cannot go backward. They cannot go in any other direction. In addition to that, linear narratives are also narratives which have a story to tell, which cannot be told in any other way. On the other hand, non-linear narratives like this. Now here I have multiple entry points and I have multiple exit points. I could click any point. I could enter an animation. Okay, and I don't like this. So I could go back and I could click some other point. And I could find some other code, and then I could click another hypertext, and then go somewhere else, and then go somewhere else. If you've ever been lost in the maze of Wikipedia, going from one article to the next article, just random article hopping, you know what I'm trying to tell you. That you can enter Wikipedia or any of these hypertext fictions at any point, and even then you would have a narrative. And that narrative would be very different from the person sitting next to you who is looking at the same fiction. So this is a crucial point of difference that reconfiguring narrative, that this chapter will reiterate again and again. This is what I'm trying to tell it to you at the beginning, that hypertext fiction challenges normative conventional modes of fiction in many different ways. Right. Let's go on to the next.
I have a doubt.
Yes, Ananta.
Ma'am, you mentioned that in Legal Passion, the story doesn't go in any other direction, not even backwards.
Okay.
But it does go backward, doesn't it?
No, see, backward in the sense, yes, that obviously a third person narrator sometimes, this is Jane Eyre maybe है, and David Copperfield maybe like, there's a third person narrator who's telling you, okay, this is what's going to happen. But what I'm trying to tell you is, ki if I say, for example, if I start with the end of Jane Eyre's life, if I say ki Jane Eyre married Rochester and had, 2 children, right? If I say that, and then proceed to tell you the story backwards, that is not how you will understand the story. To understand what Jane has at the end, you must know what she did at the beginning. Right. So the story, I'm not saying that a story cannot be told backward. I'm not saying that, for example, I am an old person. I cannot narrate my story as an old person. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm trying to say is in linear narratives, the end will make sense only if you know the beginning.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. The narrator of that story can definitely be an old person who's telling you the story. But even then, that person will begin his story in the beginning. He will say, ki, when I was young or when I did this, that is when the story will begin. Are you trying to get me? Like,
Yes, ma'am, that the reference would be made.
yes, a reference would be made to the adventures, to the stories of their youth, so that you can understand their position in their old age.
Got it, ma'am. Thank you.
But here, that is not the case. Here, you can have any entry point, any exit point, and there is no one story to be told. There is no one unified story, no one unified plot to be shared. That is the key here in a non-linear narrative, right? So, for example, okay, these are 2 videos that I will share the links with you, and I urge you to look at this, especially the second one, because it shows you how we are always surrounded by different lenses, different cameras, how people are always looking at us. That kind of anxiety, if you have, so just try to look at this. Yes, this is one example, Semiosource, which will be referenced by Linda. So maybe you guys have also already looked this up. I will share a link for this as well. Okay, so this is another game that I found, Fast City, and you can download this or I can play this for you. It's not like very hard game to do. So Fast City, the object of Fast City is nothing actually. The object of Fast City is that you click one of the X's. Okay, for example, I did this, and then you can play some kind of sound. So a sound is going to play at a loop. One, I think it's different for every X or something. I just don't really get the point of this. But again, the bigger point that this game is trying to make is that you can combine image and you can combine sound and you can include them in hypertext through the use of technology to create a hypertext fiction. So this is just like using lexias as blocks of text and then adding sound to it. So the difference between this and inflections is just very simple, that this has a lot of sound added to it and the other one really doesn't. So I found this game irritating actually. If you want to try it, I will share the link. You can download it and have fun. Right, so let's get back to our hypertextual narratives. I have all these notes ready for you. I would just like you to understand what I've been trying to tell you rather than make notes, because I will share the presentation with you and you can definitely use it and read from the chapter along with it, and you will understand everything. So just pay attention right now to like listening to what I'm trying to say, because I can't see your faces, but I hope you're listening, because this is interesting stuff. Right. And keep what I've shared with you right now, keep all those fictional examples in mind, because we'll be referencing them again and again. Right. So let's begin. I hope you have your text with you. Do you have your text? Right? Everybody has their text, right? Can someone tell me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So let's begin. What does a hypertext narrative look like? I shared that with you. I showed you all those different narratives. So remember that this chapter is going to be about fictional narratives, generally about fictional narratives, narratives in a sense which tell a story by making up characters. Well, and I was going to argue that fiction and non-fiction categories don't really matter when it comes to hypertext, and we'll understand why he does that. But when I say a narrative here in this chapter, what does that mean? Basically, it just means that a narrative is something that is trying to tell you a story. Now, that story could have fictional elements, sorry, it could have non-fictional elements, it could have any number of characteristics. But just remember that when I say narrative, it usually means you're narrating something. It's a story-like form that you're narrating. Okay, let's begin. Reconfiguring narrative. So we'll go section by section. We'll try to cover a couple of sections today. So the first section is opening remarks. And the first point that he's making in this section is that every digital narrative is not a hypertext. Right. Why is he making this point, and what does he mean by this point? So what he's trying to tell you is that digital narratives exist in more forms than hypertext. Right. So if, for example, he is going to argue that some digital narratives have a very conventional form, like the modernist narratives. Some digital narratives might not have a very conventional form. They might be postmodern, where you get into non-linearity. But not every digital narrative is necessarily going to be like a hypertext, like going from one link to another link to another link. Yes, those links can be there, but those links will be there in different forms. Right? How will they be in different forms? Because what he's going to tell you is that what do you mean by hypertext? Hypertext is on the face of it, as a structure. Think Wikipedia. It is a block of text with links embedded in it to other texts. Why is it called hypertext? Because it goes beyond the text. It is a meta-textual narrative. It goes beyond that particular text by giving you resources of other texts, by giving you access to knowledge from other sources. That is in effect what a hypertext is. Now, if you take that core idea of a hypertext, if you take this core idea of linking to other sources, of giving you knowledge about other sources, the meta-ness of a hypertext, and you apply that to a narrative, that narrative will also be hypertextual in the sense that it provides you access to other knowledges, but necessarily does not use the technology of a hypertext. That is the point that he's trying to make here. The narratives can exist in multiple forms and they can still be called digital narratives, even if they do not use the technology of a hypertext. In that sense, they embody the principle of a hypertext, the principle of digital narrative, or they might not, but they do not use that kind of particular technology. Okay, let's keep this in mind and let's start reading, Satmi. I have some sections that I'll be reading out, and I hope that you've read at least the first 5 to 10 pages, as I asked yesterday. There's no way that I can check, but hopefully you'll understand. Okay, so let's begin. Approaches to hypertext.
Can you give an example of it?
This is page number 215. The first line, starting at the first line. Every digital narrative, we must remind ourselves, does not necessarily take the form of a hypertext. As a case in point appears in Christie Sheffield Sanford's visually elegant World Wide Web fiction, Sephora in the Beginning. So this is why I was referencing Christie Sheffield Sanford yesterday, and these are two of her portraits, the links to which I showed yesterday as well. So these are two portraits that she's made. I could not find Sephora in the Beginning or references to that anywhere, but you can see what he's trying to tell you. Now, in these two portraits, there is no hypertext. There are no links that take you to another link. What is there? This superimposition of images, a superimposition of different female figures along with a text. Right, so he's saying that these digital narratives can also take such forms, and that does not make them non-digital. Right. Okay. Okay, so one of the approaches to hypertext is a modernist hypertext. Let's go on to the next page. Yes, let's go on to the next page. First paragraph se padhenge hum. As Michael Joyce, our first major author of hypertext fiction, has explained, the desire to create multiple stories out of a relatively small amount of alphanumeric text provided a major force driving force driving in writing afternoon. So he's taken the example of Michael Joyce's story Afternoon Story. So there's a comma in Afternoon Story, which he wrote in 1987. So Michael Joyce is still teaching in New York as a professor. And this is the first work of hypertext fiction. I'm sure you've heard reference to it in other chapters as well. I think he references it in the third chapter also. So this is the first work of hypertext fiction, and somebody was talking about Storyspace. So yeah, this was made with Storyspace. I've added a couple of links. I could not find the entire story online, but you can go to the first link on YouTube and you can watch this video clip of how the person is clicking the original web narrative for Afternoon Story, and then trying to find a story. So the story is basically of Peter, who if you read the story in one way, then the story is about how Peter has witnessed a car crash, and then in another way the story turns out to be how Peter thinks that his ex-wife and his son might have been in that car which has just crashed. So again, different forms of narrative depending on which kind of narrative you want to follow. And this kind of story, why does he call this modernist, is now our main question. And anybody who's read this, not the story but what I assigned yesterday, would like to answer this. Why do you think this is modern?
Because it is giving the author more power than the audience. Something of that sort was involved in this.
Okay, yes, that's a very good point. See, modernist fiction for him, for Landau. See, modern के बहुत सारे examples. Do not confuse modernism here, modernist reading of this here, with what you read in your literary movement things. Yeah, draw from that, but at the same time, do not confuse both these things. Modernism for Landau means a kind of high-handedness on the part of the author. So the author is here directing the meaning. The author is trying to tell you, okay, this is one kind of story that I am giving you access to, and I'm going to shut off access to a complete other branch of the story. You can only gain access to the second branch of the story after you've read the first branch, or if you take this path. And if you take this path, then this kind of path is blocked to you. Right. So this kind of high-handedness, this kind of control which is given to the author, that is problematic here. And let's read the narrative here. Let's read this block of quotations that he has in the second paragraph, which starts with "I want it quite simply." And I'm going to start reading from the fourth last line. All that kept me from doing so was the fact that in print, at least, one paragraph inevitably follows another. It seemed to me that if I, as author, could use a computer to move paragraphs about, it wouldn't take much to let readers do so according to some scheme I had predetermined. From one point of view, then such an approach merely intensifies the agenda of high modernism, using linking to grant the author even more power. So again, yesterday, someone raised this very good point that we have a lot of news articles, we have a lot of media, bombarding us every day. We have a lot of videos, but at the same time, those videos and those platforms work on the basis of algorithms, right? So you have advertisements, you have posts, which cater to your interest, and you think, oh, this is for me, and I am in control, but you're not actually in control. Those algorithms are in control. In the same way, here the author is in control. The author is telling you that you follow this one paragraph to another paragraph, and this is the kind of story that you can follow. Even though you think that by clicking on a link, you are following or you are creating your own path. Right? Do you guys understand what I'm trying to tell you here? That at one section, in one section, you think that you have the power. You are clicking the link, you are moving on to the next paragraph. But according to Landau, this is not so. The author has the power because the author has already predetermined the movement that you will make. You think that you are doing something new, but the author already knows what you're going to do, which is why this thing is very modernist for him, very controlling, very undemocratic in a way. So if anybody has any issues right now, they can just ask a question with this section.
Ma'am?
Yeah.
Good morning, ma'am. Ma'am, for the first point, every digital narrative is not a hypertext. Ma'am, last semester we have studied that comics, these are juxtaposition of images and phrasal text. So these are graphic narratives. So can we here give an example of this, that yes, every digital narrative is not a hypertext? Because these are also graphical discourses or graphical narratives. But again, these are not hypertexts.
See, digital. I am assuming that you're talking about digital comic books, because if we have comic books, like if you're
Yes, ma'am.
talking about,
Comics which are changed into comics which are changed into digital formats.
so there's a fundamental problem with what you just said. Ki those are narratives which are supposed to be print narratives, which are then transformed into digital. So you move from analog and then you go to digital. So us case mein you can definitely say ki they are not hypertext, because they're not. But what Landau is talking about here are core digital narratives which were just created as digital narratives. Right.
Okay, ma'am.
That is a distinction you have to keep in mind. See, if we transform, and for example, if I say that old editions of newspapers are put up online, right? So now in those
Yes,
senses
ma'am.
also, they are digital forms of some kind of old literature
Print media.
which has been put
Yes,
online.
ma'am.
But at the same time, they are not hypertext. But here the distinction is between core digital forms which are made for the digital platform. इस तरह तो the kind of books that we have, like PDFs or EPUBs or mobile books, all of these books are also not hypertexts. Because why? Because they are print forms जिनको हमने digital platform में convert किया है. So this kind of distinction we'll have to keep in mind. But at the same time, the point you raised about visual images is good, because the news article that I just showed you, all the news that's fit to print, now that would be an example of images juxtaposed together, but which is a hypertext in some form, because it leads us to other sources, it leads us to other things, but that's a digital narrative, right? So there's a lot of distinction. Okay.
Right, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Any other questions? Okay, so we're going to move on. So modernist wala हमने अब पढ़ लिया है. Let's talk about the second approach that we have, which is the which is the postmodern approach. Right. So postmodern approach, what is the difference between modernist and an example that I was going to give you about the okay, but I'll give that example for postmodernism as well. So let's go on to the next paragraph. Other authors take a self-consciously postmodern approach, using the multiplicity offered by branching links to create a combinatorial fiction. Okay, what is a combinatorial fiction? Fiction which is created in combination of things, right? Very simple. That in some ways seems the electronic fulfillment of the French group Oulipo. For example, blah blah blah. No need to read that. So let me give you some kind of example of what Oulipo is. So I have. So यहाँ पर Oulipo is written as all in lowercase, but it's supposed to be like this because it's basically a full form of a longer French title which I cannot read and have not included. So you welcome to go to this link and learn more about it. So Oulipo translated into English, it means the workshop for potential literature. Now, what is potential literature? Remember here that it is not the workshop for potential of literature, yeah, for literary potential, which are completely different things. It is for potential literature. Potential का मतलब क्या होता है? Something which can be created, right? So potential literature is what kind of potential literature can be created? What kind of potential does literature have to increase its creativity? That is the kind of angle that they're going for. And उसके आगे पढ़ते हैं. The seeking of new structures and patterns which may be used by writers in any way they enjoy. So Oulipo, as a French literary group, it included people like Italo Calvino, and you have read a lot of Calvino. I think there are examples of Calvino everywhere in this book. And Calvino is a good author. He wrote this Cloven Hoof book, which is a very good read. So Oulipo, as a group, they were against spontaneity. They were against stream of consciousness, right? Spontaneous chance or luck writing or stream of consciousness. They were against all of these forms. They rejected all these forms in favor of systematic and very self-restrictive writing. Right, systematic writing in the sense that a writing should have order not in the classical sense of having a beginning, middle, end kind of thing. No, order in the sense of playing with words, right? Playing with words, going for systematic and self-creative, self-restrictive ideas. So I am going to just have like this tiny little experiment with you to see. So you have a paragraph here that I've taken from this source, and I want you to find out what is not wrong, but what is weird about this paragraph. Anybody, you have, like, it's 12:18, so I'll give you 2 minutes. Not 2 minutes, 1 minute, because I have to teach also. Just read this paragraph. And if anybody finds out, they can tell me.
Ma'am, it questions and answers itself.
Okay. What is the question? What is the answer?
Ma'am, the question is that we have to find out what is unusual,
And the answer is?
and then the answer is that nothing is wrong with it.
No. There's nothing wrong. There's just something, a tiny thing which is missing. And it's not like an issue of grammar or punctuation. ऐसा कुछ मैं test नहीं ले रही हूँ. But it's just something is missing, and I need you to spot it. And it's like everywhere on this in this slide that thing is present, but here in this paragraph it's missing. And it's not a change of font or anything. Okay, not like that. It's a tiny thing. And we use it every day, and we use it to talk, and we use it in our writing. And it's a very important thing for writing or for just, you know, speaking. Well, now I've given you a hint. Can anybody spot it? Because I've given you 2 minutes, so I'm just going to tell you. This entire paragraph does not use the alphabet E, right? So O-lipo writing techniques include techniques like this. This technique is called the lipogram technique, Lipogram, and you will get more information from it here. So this lipogram technique omits one kind of alphabet. For example, there's a novel written on it by George Perec. It's called Avoid, and this novel Avoid does not use the alphabet E in the entirety of its novel. So if anybody is going to go and give the NET exam, this is an important piece of information that I've just given you. Right. So you can read this paragraph again, and you will find that there's no E in this narrative. So this is the kind of technique, this is the kind of combinatorial fiction that Landau is talking about. This is the kind of systematic techniques, and this is the kind of structure or pattern that they're talking about. This is not just that you have to fit a story into something. They're basically talking about textual patterns and textual strategies. So please keep that in mind when you're thinking about postmodernist fiction, right? And let's move on to the next page now, page number 217, the second paragraph. Okay. How do I go forward? Let's read this. This is the third kind of thing. Now, what he's going to say is, in some the author compounds her or his power. In others, such that blah blah. Come to the fourth line here. Readers construct or discover essentially one main narrative, and then in the next line, one comes upon either a cluster of entirely separate stories, or else one finds a narrative segment out of which one weaves one or more of them. Again, that is what I've written here, that not only are hypertextual narratives different in modernist or postmodernist forms, they also are different because of the cluster of linked narratives they have. So, for example, it could tell one main story, like the story of Peter and the car crash and his divorce. Right, or they could create a cluster of linked narratives like I've shown you here. I've given you this example of Semiosaurs. So you're free to look this up yourself, right? So this kind of example, it creates a cluster of linked stories which go from one point to another point to another point. So hypertext, uske baad aage padho, last lines पर आओ. A fourth such opposition separates fictional hypertext entirely derived from an author's own writing, and those like Patchwork Girl and Stuart Moulthrop's working parts that their authors wrote to varying degrees in the interstices of other works. Right. So it could create fictional elements, it could create non-fictional elements, it could borrow elements from other people, it could borrow elements from already published literature. Why is it giving you all of these characteristics? He's just going to come to this point in the next thing. Therefore, hypertext narrative clearly takes a wide range of forms. That is the crucial point of the first section. And please underline this and keep this in mind. That hypertext clearly takes a wide range of forms, best understood in a number of axes. Right, and these axes is going to give you the reader choice के हिसाब से they're different, intervention के हिसाब से they're different, empowerment के हिसाब से all of this is already we've talked about this कि they have different kind of forms, they straddle different kind of genres, they include different elements. Some might include music, sound, some might include images, some might not, some might have hyperlinks, some might not have hyperlinks, some might be completely digital, some might be completely audible. Audio based, right? So you have different kind of narratives, or some might just be visual, but all of these are digital narratives. All of these narratives then take on different forms. Now come to the next page, right? ऊपर से fourth line, I avoid such polarities. After telling you that hypertext take on so many different forms in so many different narrative shapes, now he comes to his own assertion about this, that I avoid such polarities because particularly in the case of hypertext fiction and poetry, they hinder analysis by exaggerating difference, overrating uniformity, and suppressing our abilities to perceive complex mixtures of qualities or tendencies. That is the crucial point here, which I've written in the 7th point of the presentation, that these axes might be rejected. Why? Because they hinder the analysis. What the point that he's trying to make, I'm going to share this slide with you, so I'm going to stop this here. The point that he's trying to make here is that hypertext fiction not only is what do you say, it is not only built out of different forms, but the analysis of these forms is itself problematic. Why? Because it makes us very conventional. It leads us back to how we analyze conventional narrative forms. And how do we analyze conventional narrative forms? We analyze them by looking at certain characteristics. We assign them on the basis of genres, or we divide them on the basis of characters, we divide them on the basis of centuries or authors or content matter. So he says, let us not do that to digital narrative fiction. Let us not do that to hypertext. Why? Because it's only going to hinder our own analysis. By dividing them into categories, by sorting them out into different pigeonholes, what we're basically doing is we're taking away from the text. We're taking away from the power of the text. And therefore, to let that power be, and to also realize that none of these categories or none of these classifications are superior or inferior to the other. We must realize that. And therefore, digital fiction does not really need to be classified into any kind of form. The only thing that you need to remember here is that digital fiction is not always hypertextual. Okay, digital fiction can take on many forms. He's shown you all those examples, and I've shown you more examples. It could be modernist, postmodernist, it could have different kind of varieties, but at the same time, this classification should not should not be the defining feature of how we look at digital fiction. And he's going to tell you more about how not to look at digital fiction, and then in the middle of the chapter he's going to come at how to actually read narrative fiction. So tomorrow also we'll be discussing another strategy of not looking at digital fiction. And then in like a couple of days, maybe next week, we'll move on to how to look at it actually. Okay, any questions we have at this point? We still have 2 minutes. I've taken your attendance, I've taken a screenshot. So any other questions you have? No questions? इतना अच्छा पढ़ाया मैंने. Any comments? Yeah, Saloni?
Nothing, ma'am. I was saying आप अच्छा ही पढ़ाते हो.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other doubt or something you might have? So, abhi first section he gave you just read 3 pages today, and it's going to go slow. So I want to read you. I want you to read the next 2 sections: the Aristotelian conception of plot and the quasi-hypertext. Aristotelian conception of plot and the quasi-hypertextuality in print text. These 2 sections we'll try to do them tomorrow because the second section is very short. I'm going to leave you now. So have a nice
Ma'am,
day.
we can read it and we can ask it in the beginning of tomorrow's class.
Obviously, read the first section. I know many of you have not read it because मुझे class का भी पता है, and I know you will not read it, especially अब तो मैं check भी नहीं कर सकती. So read it and ask questions tomorrow, and read the other 2 sections so that I just have to talk about the main points, right? And if you have any doubts, you can always text me. And I'll be putting up these lectures on YouTube also, like I did last year. So if any of you have missed this or you didn't understand what I was saying, just go back and play it again. Okay? Bye. I'm going to stop this.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.